After everything was said and done, the Wolf of Wall Street had scammed investors out of $200 million. If you want to know how exactly he got this money or how he spent it so far without being caught, then make sure to check out my last two videos. In this video, we'll be looking at how Jordan Belfort was finally exposed. Starting off, Stratton Oakmont's first encounter with law enforcement would be with the SEC. In 1992, the SEC would accuse their brokerage firm of both stock manipulation and defrauding investors. Their evidence for stock manipulation was a company called Nova Capital Inc. Between December 1989 and August 1990, the stock price would over double from $4 to $9.25, a gain that didn't correlate with any corporate news or market forces. The SEC estimated that Stratton Oakmont profited about $11 million from the manipulation. Now again, though the numbers make it obvious that there was some sort of stock manipulation, it's basically impossible to prove securities fraud without an insider cracking. As for the defrauding investors accusation, the SEC accused 3 executives for misrepresenting and omitting facts about companies they pitched to investors. This was much easier to prove simply by tapping phone lines or posing as phony investors. Stratton Oakmont knew that the SEC really wouldn't be able to prove the securities fraud, but they wanted the SEC off their back. So, they agreed to a settlement where the company would pay $2.5 million in fines and the 3 executives would have to pay $100,000 each personally in fines. On top of this, Jordan Belfort would have to step down from running the company. Jordan wouldn't actually do this, but he would sell his share of Stratton Oakmont. He felt confident that the SEC couldn't build up enough evidence against him to charge him for securities fraud, and this would actually hold true till the very end. Jordan's downfall would actually be the FBI. Agent Cohen and Coleman would begin investigating the firm and Jordan Belfort in 1992. They spent a considerable amount of time trying to bust Jordan Belfort for money laundering cases related to Stratton Oakmont, but his well-paid staff simply wouldn't crack. Furthermore, Swiss banks were also not very willing to share banking information with the FBI on the basis of a money laundering case, so the FBI switched to a different approach: tax evasion. Tax evasion and money laundering are often used interchangeably, but there is a subtle difference. One can evade taxes without laundering money by simply not paying the taxes, but one cannot launder money without also committing tax evasion. So, when Jordan was shipping over millions of dollars to Switzerland, he was not only laundering money but also committing tax evasion. I guess Jordan wasn't paying his money launderers as well as he was paying his Strattonites, because the FBI was able to find witnesses testifying that they helped Jordan smuggle money to Switzerland. These witnesses were also able to provide information about the bankers Jordan was using in Geneva. It still took a lot of time, but this evidence would eventually prove sufficient enough for the Swiss authorities to mandate the bankers to cooperate with the investigation. Once they got to Jordan's Swiss banker, it didn't take long to gather evidence for Jordan and Danny, or in the movie, Donnie's money laundering. In the movie, we only see Jordan being arrested, but in reality, both Jordan and Danny would be arrested on the basis of money laundering. The maximum fine for money laundering is actually only $500,000, and the reduction of this fine wouldn't be nearly enough to convince Jordan and Danny to cooperate. What would really scare them though was a prison sentence of up to 20 years. A chance to significantly reduce this term would finally get the lead Strattonites to crack, and this is how the securities fraud occurring within Stratton Oakmont would finally surface. In the movie, we see Jordan agreeing to be wired, but he ends up passing a note to Donnie warning that he is wired. In reality, this would not happen. Jordan and Danny would actually both be wired and be forced to cooperate for several years of evidence collecting. Agent Cohen says that there was no resistance from either individual and that they both quickly caved to turn on Stratton Oakmont when presented with up to 25 years in jail. Jordan and Danny would also both plead guilty, but the final verdict for the case took years and they wouldn't be convicted till 2004. Eventually, the final sentence for Jordan came out to be 4 years in prison along with $110 million in fines. As for Danny, he was also sentenced to 4 years in prison, but he actually had to pay more fines at $200 million as Jordan had stepped out of Stratton Oakmont much earlier than Danny. Both men were also mandated to pay 50% of their future incomes to pay back investors until the fines were paid off. Jordan would be released in 22 months and Danny would be released in 39 months. And so far, Jordan has actually paid back $13 million, which sounds like a sizable chunk. But in reality, $11 million of these dollars was seized during his arrest, so he has actually only paid back $2 million. Meanwhile, he's working as a motivational speaker, earning up to $100,000 per speech. So he's still making a very good living, earning well over 7 figures a year. Jordan claims that he has been paying back as much as he can, but FBI agents disagree, claiming that Jordan hasn't been making payments in years. Whether or not Jordan will actually pay this amount back is unclear, but at least he isn't partaking in any more securities frauds. Anyways, that's how Jordan made a fortune, spent a fortune, how he was finally caught, and his situation today. If you guys thought this video series explained Jordan's real life well, then make sure to drop a like, and make sure to subscribe to see more questions just like these logically answered. But until then, I'm Hari, and I'll see you guys on the next one.